be recorded. The portion is that historical background of the Constitution Assembly, and what are the important points that we have to noted about these things. The history of our constitution is very interesting as it elucidates how and why our country chose the parliamentary form of democracy. There is a different form of democracy, one as a parliamentary form, another as a presidential form of the democracy of best. In presidential form, that is also parliament is also exist. Then you will able to learn what is the difference between the Indian president and American president. What is the power and function of these two authorities? Definitely you will learn in a subsequent classes. Here the portion is that what is historical background. It is telling about the history from why it's needed and what was the construction scenario that times and how many persons are attended these meetings. Definitely the different things is coming in this lecture, and this lecture will be very interesting. And the portion is that the British came to India in the 17th century for trading purpose. As you already we know about that, around 1757, and in 1765, and they received the Diwani rights in the province of Bengal. That time the Bengal currently you can presume that that time of Bengal is currently the Bangladesh plus West Bengal plus Bihar plus Odisha plus Jharkhand. The entire province of these areas is known as the Bengal province. So Britishers received the Diwani right in the Bengal state in 1765. From there, from there, they have started interfering in the all those things that is going in that particular territory. From there, the part is that in the history of around 190 years of British rule, in this time, there are different phases came at the time, and India has also developed. But that time, Britishers observed the different points and then liberate that points on the basis of their philosophy and imposed to the Indian system. And time by time, they have enacted the different legislative and as such the regulation acts, Pitt's India Act, Charter Acts, and there are different charter acts in Charter Act 1833, 1855, 1853. There's a different charters are there. And after 1857, the company rule ended, company rule ended, and the throne is thrown directly taking the rule of this land. Sometimes the Indian system need to have a constituent assembly to making a framing of their own constitutions. Later they attained the rights to collect the revenue. I'm just coming to the picture that here the British later they attained the right to collect the revenue and self-governance. For doing this, they enacted various law and rules and regulations. As I told you, and uh, time to times, they enacted the different rules for the different purposes, like as the regulation acts, which in acts, charter acts, Government of India Act 1919, Government of India Act 1935, and India Independence Act 1947. This is the completely different charters. From doing this, they enacted various law rules regulations. Further, with the Charter Act of 1833. Always remember, this type of questions always come in the competition exam. Which charter stated that the Governor General of Bengal became the Governor General of India? Always remember the Charter Act 1833. This is the important Charter Act. In that particular charter, it mentions that from enacting the date of this charter, the Governor General of Bengal is now called the Governor General of India. So this is the portions. And the central legislative was created with which made the British supreme rules of India. Obviously, at the times they have enacted that particular rules, and it started this It started with this in Charter 33. There is also features. It made the Governor General of Bengal as the Governor General of India and vested in him all civil and military powers. That means that rules totally make the Governor General of Bengal as the Governor General of India and vested all the power, like the civil and military powers, to the Governor General of India. And this act created for the first time government of India having authority over the entire territorial area possessed by the British in India. If anyone say that which charter act which charter act stated that Governor General of Bengal become the Governor General of India, and the first time the British enacted the law for the entire territory of the British in India. That that charter is 1833 charter. That law is Charter Act 1833. So remember this charter. This charter sometime in exam you can recall it. Definitely it will be helpful in a competition exam. Now question is that it enacted a law and make the Governor General of Bengal become the Governor General of India. Then who was the first Governor General of India? Now the question is there. So answer is Lord William Bentinck. Always remember this type of questions always come in exam. The first Governor General of India is known as Lord William Bentinck. Was the first Governor General of India. It deprived the Governor of Bombay. It deprived the Governor of Bombay and Madras of their legislative power. That means the Governor General of Bengal is a supreme. Now becomes Governor General of India. So the other two province, that is the Madras and Bombay, their legislative power is completely at the time deprived. And the supreme power, that is the Governor General of Bengal, also known as the Governor General of India, that becomes supreme. So this is the few features about the Charter Act 1833. And in this Charter Act, also it's mentioned that it ended the activity of East India Company as a commercial body. That means this Charter Act 1833 ended the activity of East India Company as a commercial body, which became a purely administrative body. That means they came here as a trading purpose. Slowly it gained the civil, the Diwani rights. But by this act, it ended the supremacy of the East India Company in the field of commercial body, and it's completely a administrative body. It provided that the company territory in India were held by its trust for His Majesty, his heirs and successors. That means directly related to the portions to the British Crown. So this act introduced a system of open competition for selection of civil servants. That is another point. But the important takeaway is that Governor of Bengal became the Governor General of India, and Lord William Bentinck was the first Governor General of India. आपको ये भी याद होना चाहिए. Along with this charter, you have to remember Lord William Bentinck was the first Governor General of India. So this is the certain features about this. Now the next point, the rule of company finally ended with the enactment of Government of India Act 1858. Now the in Government of India Act 1858, this provided that after this enactment of this law, the British Crown directly take over the rule of rule on India, rule over the India. British Crown became the rulers of India and started administrating our country through its government. That means the government elected in a British, they directly take over the control of Indian territory. And the Indian Council Act of 1861, 1892, 1909 started giving representation to the Indians in the Viceroy Council. After 1858, the Governor General of India is also called the Governor General become the Viceroy. And if anyone asks you who was the first Viceroy of India, if anyone remember, then tell me. Otherwise, I'm just going to announce it. I'm just going to tell you about this Lord Canning. Lord Canning became the first Viceroy of India. Similarly, Lord William Bentinck was the first Governor General of India. Let's remember these things. So, by doing so, you have remembered the point. Two important point of the Charter Act 1833 and Government of India Act 1858. Charter Act 1833 uh, stated that Governor General of India, Bengal became the Governor General of India, and the Lord William Bentinck was the first Governor General of India. Here, in the case of Government of India Act 1858, it provided that Governor General of India now become the Viceroy of India, and the Lord Canning was the first Viceroy. Thereafter, the Britishers restored legislative power back to some province. In some state, they restored legislative power that was taken back by the Governor General of Bengals and the Governor General of India. But now, after the enactment of these Indian Constitutional Act 1861, 1892, and time to time, it restored legislative power back to the some province. They adopted decentralization of power between the center and state. They adopted, that is, British adopted decentralization of power between the center and state. Later, with this enactment of Government of India Act 1919, Legislative Council come into existence in all the states. You will learn this part in a power and function of the Rajya Sabha. When you have learned the power and function of the Rajya Sabha, that means second chamber. That will asking about the second chamber. That is asking about the second chamber. Second chamber. Why we are needed a second chamber, and what is the use of that? But at the time of 1919, Legislative Council was the only one chamber, and Britisher slowly provided this power. That means restored the legislative power back to the province, and also recognize the Indian Council Act, and providing the providing the Indians to come into the Legislative Council, provided the opportunity of Indians to come into the Legislative Councils. So that is the some key points. And the Britishers adopted bicameral structure with separate central and state government. Here, bicameral in the sense that with separate central and state. It was for the first time when people could elect their own representative through direct elections. So here, the point that the first time the Indian people elect their own representative through the Indian Council Act 1919. And the Constitution of India later adopted this quasi-federal. This quasi-federal. It's not completely federal, it's a quasi-federal. That means most of the power that is there in the state and the residue power that's reached to the union, and the later it adopted in the Indian Constitution as a part of the state subject, central subject, and concurrent subject. In the part of the concurrent subjects, there both the center and state can make the law, and this part is taken from the Constitution of Australia. You will learn the later part of this lecture or in the subsequent lecture. Was one of the most important event in the history of the Constitution of India. Which law? Enactment of Government of India Act 1935. And the Indian government at the time during the framing of Constitution, most of the part adopted from this law. Divided power of governance into the federal list, provincial list, and concurrent list. Later, the Constitution of India also incorporated this division of power between the central and state. And a central state power is divided into the three lists, that is the state list, concurrent list, and union list. You will also learn this in the center-state relations. This act provided more autonomy for official governments to the province. It had also established the federal court, which is now called the Supreme Court of India. Federal Court is also known as the Supreme Court of India. And this enactment, that is Government of India Act 1935, I'm talking about here. After that, there is a one another law. The enactment of the Indian Independence Act 1947 marked the final step in the departure of British from the India, and our country became an independent and sovereign state after this act. That means the important points are here is Government of India Act 1919. That is the Indian Council Act 1919, Government of India Act 1935, Government of India Act 1858. So, and time to time, British has enacted the different law and just any mention and demarcation of the policies, principles to the provincial and state and viceroys as well as governor general, whichever part is applicable. So that's the part of the things is that they try to completely capture all the territories part and completely the and control the whole the part. And after the enactment of Indian Independence Act 1947, this marked the final departure of the British from India. This act de facto established central and provincial government besides laying the foundation of the Constitutional Assembly. Means this act, which act? That means Indian Independence 1947. De facto established. It established the central and provincial government. That is central government known as union government and provincial government is known as the state government. And central state relations governed by the state list, central list, and concurrent list. And it also the laying the foundation stone of the Constitutional Assembly. And the Constitutional Assembly of India came into existence as per the Province of Cabinet Mission Plan of May 1946. In the Cabinet Mission Plan, it clearly mentioned about the India must have their own Constitutional Assembly to framing the next course of action. To framing the next course, that means in the form of their own law systems for framing of the Constitution. Now the portion is that when the demand for a constitution was raised first time, it was in 1936. It was in 1936 that the idea of the Constituent Assembly for India was put forward for the first time by M.N. Roy, a pioneer of communist movement in India. That means the M.N. Roy was the first one to raise the voice for demanding a Constituent Assembly in 1934. And the very next year, that is in 1935, the Indian National Congress for the first time officially demanded a Constituent Assembly to frame the Constitution of India. That is a part of 1935. First time it raised by 1934 by M.N. Roy. And INC recognized this first time in 1935. But later in 1938, Jawaharlal Nehru, on behalf of NC, declared that the Constitution of Free India must be framed without outside interference by a Constitutional Assembly elect on the basis of adult franchise. That means in 1934, first time the voice of demanding Constitutional Assembly raised. The very next years, the Indian National Congress first time recognized this, and after 3 years, that is 1938, Jawaharlal Nehru officially declared that the Constitution of India, Free India, must be framed without outside interference and by a Constituent Assembly. India Constitution of India must be framed, but who framed it? Because Constituent Assembly will frame it, and the Constituent Assembly member will elect on the basis of adult franchise. The demand was finally accepted in principle by the British government in what is known as the August Offer of 1940. So always remember, explain August Offer. If questions come in this form, explain August Offer. Yeah, what is the meaning of August Offer? Then you have to mention August offer indicates that it's stated that first time the British government recognized the just demand was finally accepted. Not the word recognize, not the exact word we're using this, but you can use the word accepted. Accepted in principle, Siddhantic groups. In principle, it accepted the demand for a constituent assembly. So I think hope it is clear to everyone till now. Or if you know the chronology of the things, then it will very easy for you to write the correct answer in the exam. When the question sometimes it may be straightforward, sometimes questions the meaning is hidden on the paragraph. You have to extricate it and write in your own word. That what. Now the next part, its major task was to facilitate transfer of sovereign power from British authority to Indian hands. Then now the points is Constituent Assembly. What is the meaning of Constituent Assembly here? Why we need to this? The major what was the major task of Constituent Assembly? The Constituent Assembly task was to facilitate transfer of sovereign power from British authority to Indian government. That is the part. And the assembly was to have proportional representative from existing provincial legislative and from various special states. Once the Britishers accepted the offer of the offer to constituent assembly, after that, after that, the questions come in the fore. The question came into fore that what was the method of selections of the constituent assembly member? The thing is that it must be the as already declared by the J.L. Nehru in 1938. The Constitution of India must be framed without outside interference by the Constituent Assembly and elected on the basis of adult franchise. Already he has declared it. So in line of that, it must be elected on the basis of proportional representative. That means every sections will be represented in the Constituent Assembly. The total strength of the Constituent Assembly was to be 389. In actually, it was 389. But later, Muslim League backed out, and the total strength reduced to the 299 effectively. Of this, 296 were to be allotted to British India and 93 states to be the princely state. Out of 296 seats allocated to the British India, 292 members were to be drawn from the 11 governors province and 4 from the 4 chief commissioner province, 1 from each. So this is the some portions that some numerical figures you have to remember like this. But one thing is an important figure, that is the 299. In fact, 299 after the backup of Muslim League. This assembly served as the first parliament of India. Obviously, the Constituent Assembly served as the first parliament of India. And this assembly includes all important personality of India at the time, with the exception of M.G. Gandhi, Mahatma Gandhi. Always remember, Mahatma Gandhi not the part of the Constituent Assembly. So remember that Mahatma Gandhi was not in the Constituent Assembly. So he has not discussed debated in the any law of the just law framed by the Constituent Assembly. But those who have framed the law, definitely they have taken some consent from the Mahatma Gandhi. It depends upon the personal thinking. But on the basis of on the record, Mahatma Gandhi was not the part of the Constituent Assembly. That's the briefing must be remembered. The Constituent Assembly held its first meeting on December 19, 1946. Always remember this date, December 19, 1946. And the Muslim League boycotted the meeting and insisted on a separate state of Pakistan. So due to this, the Muslim League boycotted and back off from the Constituent Assembly. The meeting was thus attended by only 211 members. Effectively, it reduced to the 299. Now, always remember who was the first and temporary president, interim president of Assembly. Dr. Sachidanand Sinha was the oldest member who was elected as the temporary president of the Assembly following the French practice. This is the French practice to choose the oldest member as the temporary president, that is the interim president. Later on December 11, 1946, Dr. Rajendra Prasad was elected as the president of Assembly. Similarly, both S.C. Mukherjee and V.T. Krishnamacharya. I have noticed that most of the persons are remember the point who was the temporary president and the by the later full and the as a president. But sometimes forget to remember this point that who was the vice president. There was a two vice president. One is S.C. Mukherjee, another one is V.T. Krishnamacharya, who were elected as a vice president of Assembly. Remember these points. 32 members attended the meeting of a special committee on 10th. After this, it first met on December 1946 in Delhi, and historical journey was started, which saw India attaining independence, deciding on its national flag, national insignia, and national anthem. H.V.R. Iyengar, remember that H.V.R. Iyengar was the Secretary General of Assembly. H.V.R. Iyengar, and S.N. Mukherjee was the chief draftsman. There was a 13 committee was framed. And drafting committee was one of them, headed by the anyone just tell me, headed by the drafting committee was headed by the Dr. V.R. Ambedkar. So always remember that. Thus begin the exercise for drafting the constitution with Dr. B.R. Ambedkar as the chairman of the drafting committee, who is often called the father of Indian constitution. And the drafting committee took less than the 6 months to prepare its draft. In all, it set only for the 141 days. It set only the 141 days. And most important thing that out of the 299 members, there were 15 women members were also part of the Constituent Assembly. If you remember any of them, you can recall here. But you can Google it and you can find out the all women name. Here the portions about the question is that how many women members were part of the Constituent Assembly? So immediately you can answer it. There were 15 women members were part of the Constituent Assembly. And the 299 members. Why there was a 299 members? Already I told you, Muslim League boycotted to have a separate state, that is a Pakistan. So effective member was 299. Out of that, 15 were women. Assembly took less than the 3 years, around 2 years, 11 months and 17 days around, to complete this and to draft the constitution, and finally but ready on the 26th November 1949. 32 members attended the meeting of a special committee on 10th. There was a special committee was formed to finally to enact this constitution, to completely apply this constitution. On the special committee meeting on 10th April 1948, chaired by the Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, after more than 2 years of deliberations, the Constituent Assembly finally approved the Constitution. Constituent Assembly finally approved the Constitution on 26 November 1949. Remember this date. Why this is remember? On 26 November 1949, it was ready but applied from the 26th January 1950. But some of the clauses, some of the law that already applied from the same day that they were approved. And in 2015, Government of India declared the 26th November as a constitutional day, National Constitutional Day, which is now celebrated as the Constitutional Day. The Constituent Assembly formally adopted the Constitution on 26 January 1950 to make our country a sovereign republic. And there is a history hidden in this part why Constituent Assembly decided to adopt the Constituent Assembly formally adopt the Constitution on 26 January 1950. But it was approved on 26 November 1949, but adopted in 26 January 1950. Why there is a 2 month delay? You can also search it, but I am giving you some clue. Clue is hidden in the around the 1930 Indian National Congress meeting that was held in Lahore near the bank of Ravi River. Near the bank of the Ravi, the Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru declared that on 1920. This is the history of 1920. Already you know that Indian National Congress was established on 28th December 1885. So from there is a general trend in the annual meeting was held around the 26 to 28 December every year. But you cannot correlate these things in the current scenario of International Congress. But that point the International Congress have all the freedom fighters there. So question is that in 1929, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru declared that on 26 January 1930 will be marked as a Purna Swaraj Day. Like this, you can also Google it and find out the exact find out the also answer about this. I'm just given the hint of this. The Constituent Assembly adopted the national flag on 22nd July 1947 and the national anthem and national song on 24 January 1950. Sri Nandalal Bose, a pioneer of modern Indian art, designed the border of every page of the Constitution and adorned it with the art pieces. Sri Nandalal Bose, remember the name of this guy, a pioneer of modern Indian art, designed the border of every page. And Sri Prem Bihari Narayan Rai Jada, master of calligraphic art, single-handedly handwrote the Constitution. Single-handedly handwrote the Constitution. Sri Prem Bihari Narayan Rai Jada single-handedly handwrote the Constitution, whereas the Sri Nandalal Bose designed the border of every page of the Constitution and adorned it with the art pieces. It took him 6 months to complete the task and charged no money for the job. Both of them. The Constitution Assembly appointed a total of 13 committee out of 13 committee total deal with the different tasks of Constitutional Assembly. Out of these, 8 were major committee and the other were minor committee. So that's but the part of the all about the history of Constitutional Assembly. So in a brief, you can understand that 1934, M. Roy first raised this voice. 1935, officially first time adopted this part, that is INC adopted this. Yeah, raised this, you can say. That 3 years later, that is 1938, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru declared that the Constitution of Free India will be framed without any outer interference, in the Constitutional Assembly with the adult franchise. So that was adopted in principle in 1940 by the British government. Then the what was started. And actually, this is known as the August offer. In 1940, when he received this, that is known as the August offer. In the history of India, you can call it August offer. So from there, it was the started, and you have learned all the parts. Now you have to move to the part of the Government of India Act 1935. This is also the landmark law. This act marked a second milestone toward a completing responsible government in India. It was a lengthy and detailed document having 321 sections. 320 sections and 10 schedules. The feature of that act were as follows. That first is It provides for the establishment of all India federations consisting of provincial and principal state as the unit. All India Federation. First time uniting it this part like this. The act divided the power between the center and the unit in terms of three lists: federal list for center, provincial list, and concurrent list. With both hereditary power were given to the viceroy. Hereditary power were given to the viceroy. However, the federation never came into the being as a princely state did not join it. Never formed. It abolished diarchy system of the province and introduced a provincial autonomy in the place. But important is that it abolished diarchy and introduced the provincial autonomy in its place. And the province were allotted to act as the autonomous unit of administration. It is necessary to have an autonomous unit so that we can work independently and just independently and in the lieu of the federations, in the lieu of the entire part as a federations or as a entirely unit part. It provided for the adoption of diarchy at the center. Consequently, the federal subject were divided into reserve subject and transfer subject. And however, this province of act did not come into the operational at all. But in the constitutions, most of the part is taken from the Government of India Act 1935. It introduced bicameralism in 6 out of 11 provinces. Thus, the legislature are Bengal, Bombay, Madras, Bihar, Assam, and United Province, that is known as UP, were made bicameral consisting of legislative council and legislative assembly. So that currently Bengal do not have a bicameral system. West Bengal, Bombay, that is the Maharashtra, have a bicameral system. Madras is Chennai, that is you can Tamil Nadu. Tamil Nadu currently do not have the bicameral system. They abolished. Bihar still have a bicameral system. Assam do not have, and UP still have. So the further points, it further extended the principle of communal representative by the providing separate electorate for the depressed class. SC ST have a different class and women and labor that create the communal, that disturb the communal harmony. It abolished the Council of India established by the Government of India Act 1858, and the Secretary of State for India was provided with a team of advisor in this part. It extended franchise. About 10% of the total population got the voting right to it. Always remember, in this act, it mentions that about 10% of the total population got the voting right. And it provided for the establishment of the Reserve Bank of India. The Reserve Bank of India was established on the by this after this enactment of this act. It provided for the establishment of not only a federal public service commission but also a provincial public service commission and joint public service commission for 2 or more provinces. So that is the also part. It provided for the establishment of the federal court, which was set up in the 1937. So federal court was also established and also established the RBI. That was part. On February 2010, British Prime Minister Calmet Attlee declared the British rule of India would end by the June 13, 1947. That is the India Independence Act 1947. We'll continue with this the next lecture. That's in the next week. We'll continue with this. And probably in next 2 lectures, they will finish the particular units. Hope you have understand all these things. We'll meet you in the next lectures. Just tell me what you have learned in today's lectures. What you have learned? Tell me. बताइए अनुराग.
Sir, historical background of Constituent Assembly, Government of India Act 1935.
That's it. That's the part. And tell me, who was the Vice President of Constituent Assembly?
Vice President are 2 people. It's H.C. Mukherjee
and V.T. Krishnamacharya. V.T.
Yes, sir,
Krishnamacharya.
Yes,
That's
sir.
the part. So that's the today's lectures. And only you have to listen carefully, and that things that was very necessary that once you get after listening this, you make up a separate notes. If you find, definitely it will be helpful in your competition exam. Not only this exam, also in a competition exam will help you. So by this, just bind